Welcome back to the Response Drivers Podcast, where we feature top marketing minds and dig into their inspiring stories. Learn how these leaders think and find big ideas to push your results and sales to the next level. Now, let's get started.
Hey, I'm Rick Rapé, host of the Response Drivers Podcast. Here I dive deep with marketing experts and innovators to learn how they approach targeted marketing and use data-driven strategies to acquire and retain customers. We'll talk about what's working, what's changing, and how they can stay ahead in an evolving marketing landscape. Response Drivers is brought to you by RPM Direct Marketing. RPM helps companies develop hard-hitting direct mail creative and utilize advanced testing and targeting methodologies to reach customers and prospects. Our goal is to fully optimize your marketing performance to drive more sales and exceed growth expectations. RPM delivers smarter, more profitable direct mail solutions so you can turn your mail programs into a predictable, efficient sales channel. Check out rpmdm.com to learn more. My guest today is Dave Scott. Dave is the founder and CEO of Evil Genius Games. He's a national expert on customer acquisition, marketing, and automation tools. He brings over 25 years of experience leading marketing initiatives for companies including Amazon, Twitter, AT&T, and Oracle, just to name a few. He's also a serial entrepreneur and founded and sold 3 VC-backed technology startups, including an on-demand streaming service he sold to Kevin Hart. He's taught marketing at several prestigious schools and has received a number of industry awards, including CMO of the Year and Marketer of the Year. He's an author and has 2 bestsellers on the topic of customer acquisition and lead generation: The New Rules of Lead Generation, Proven Strategies to Maximize Marketing ROI, and The Essentials of Small Business Marketing. Dave is very passionate about growth, customer acquisition, digital and performance-based marketing. And in his free time, he's an avid board gamer, nationally ranked in chess and the board game Risk. Wow. Thanks for joining me today, Dave. I'm excited to learn from you.
Thank you very much. I think your introduction made me look really old, I think.
You've done a lot. I had to edit it down to that. There was so much out there about what you've done. Those are just some of the highlights, actually.
Yeah. Well, it's been busy.
You have been busy. Well, you've had a very diverse career and have worked for tech giants and innovative startups. What pivotal experiences have shaped your approach to customer acquisition and performance marketing?
So it's interesting. I'll tell you a little bit about my origin story. I didn't start out thinking I was going to be a marketer. And in fact, I went to Wharton for my MBA and I used to sleep through my marketing classes. Professor Lynn Lodish, who is now retired, he ran into me a little while ago. He's like, "Dave, I just never understood why you kept sleeping through my classes." And I was like, you know what? It just looks like a lot of fluff. It's just like whether or not it's blue or it's teal, it just didn't interest me. But as a computer science undergrad, as a programmer, as a designer in theory, as soon as marketing became programmatic, as soon as it became analytical, it really piqued my interest, right? And so rather than determining whether or not the website should be teal or navy blue, you could just A/B test it. And started to think about A/B testing from that perspective, I got really excited. Then I realized that, it wasn't just the introduction of technology that started the science, but, direct marketers like you guys have been doing this science forever. This concept of data-driven marketing.
Yeah, right.
And so that's kind of how I got into it, and that's how I became passionate about it, is the fact that you can really truly use data to make smart marketing decisions.
That makes a lot of sense. How do you think automation and technology are shaping marketing today and affecting marketing? What platforms have you found to be most effective?
Well, I don't think that you could run an effective marketing organization today without technology. In fact, a report came out a while ago from Forrester saying that the average CMO has 28 technologies in their technology stack. Not only that, but I do believe for a large amount of companies that the IT expense line item for marketers and for CMOs is either close to or equal of the CIO, meaning that we're spending just as much on technology now as the CIO used to spend on technology. Now that we're starting to see third-party technologies, we're starting to see business-led IT investment decisions. And so now I really believe that the modern day CMO is really a CIO.
Mm, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um, you mentioned something when we were talking earlier about your experiences at AWS when you came in and started working there. Talk a little bit about that experience with their tech stack.
Yeah, I mean, so, I've been at this for, gosh, 25 years, and I've seen the tech stack grow, grow, and grow. Every single time I've gone into a new environment, whether or not it's a Fortune 500 tech company or whether or not it's a startup, the very first question we have to scratch our heads around is, all right, what tech stack we're going to create? What CRM tool? What email service provider? What landing page creator? Or which cloud-based platform we're going to serve our website on? It's all the typical stuff. In fact, you could argue that it's a playbook
Hmm.
for doing that. But my number of years at AWS, which I just recently left to start this new company, Evil Genius Games,
Hmm.
really opened my eyes to a different approach and a different process around that. Of course, when I went there, the first question I asked is, "What's the tech stack?" And they came back and said, "What tech stack?"
Mm.
And given the DNA of Amazon, where they're really an engineering-led company and
Hmm.
have just this DNA of make it ourselves, they had a strong philosophy around making everything themselves. So
Mm.
making the CRM tool, making the email service tool, or using the Amazon versions of those.
Hmm.
And even like we didn't even use Zoom. We actually had a product called Amazon Chime. So Amazon even went so far as to create our own, virtual meeting technology. And they felt strongly that like having that homegrown technology is really, really mission critical to make sure that first of all, information stays within the company, so there's a security issue there. But then
Hmm.
also to make sure that it's really truly meeting the needs of the customer.
Hmm.
I was surprised to see that Amazon Web Services marketing team had a sizable engineering team that reported right under the CMO that did a lot of this work. Completely different paradigm than what I'm used to.
Yeah, and how did that work out? Do you think that it worked out well in the long run, or would it have been easier to buy things that already existed outside of the company?
Well, the first thing I want to say is that, as a caveat, not everyone has the pocketbook that Amazon has.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's the big obstacle that most of us face,
not
for
only
sure.
that, but not every company also has the DNA to do it, right? I mean, so
Right.
you could probably imagine, you could probably assume
Hmm.
that Amazon has got really, really phenomenal engineering processes, right? And they know how to build
Hmm.
product. And
Hmm.
so they're able to use all those proprietary and best practices to be able to do something great whenever
Hmm.
any new product is developed.
Hmm.
So they do that for their websites, they do that for their services, but then why not do that for internal tools as well? So I
Yeah,
think that companies like Amazon have a head start when it thinks about that. But I
sure.
do think that moving forward, we as marketers have to decide how much of the stuff we're going to bring in-house and how much of the stuff we're going to outsource.
Hmm.
Because I think that there's the other part of the argument is every single time you bring in a new vendor, every single time you're trying to tie those two APIs together, right? You have the API to tie those two technologies together, or you're
Right.
trying to customize that piece of software for use. It adds complication, it adds points of failure, it adds expense,
Hmm.
and then all of a sudden we're dealing with spaghetti.
I was
So
just thinking of that exact word. That's
right,
amazing that you
yeah,
came up with that. Yeah.
yeah, and so I wonder where, and so given the fact that we've been in a place where we have purchased every single technology that we've purchased in the past. I wonder whether or not the pendulum is going to swing over to where we
Hmm.
actually start to design and develop our own products. And I
Yeah.
think AI is giving us the ability to do that. The fact that
Yeah.
AI can now write its own code, as an
Yeah.
example, could AI really sort of build these custom tools
Right.
without having the pocketbooks of the DNA of an Amazon Web Services?
Right. I just went to a training on late last week about AI agents and what people are doing with AI agents and what that opens up. And the capabilities that opens up. And I can see that a lot of companies, especially the larger companies, are going to be doing a lot of customization on top of their software with AI agents and AI tools. Um, and I think eventually that'll become accessible for smaller and smaller companies over time, right?
Yeah, and so the question is, how fast will it get to those smaller companies, right?
Yeah. Well,
That
as
affordable for every marketer rather than just the people who've got deep pockets.
yeah, it seemed like based on my training last week that it was still something that needed a lot of
Hand holding.
technical support and coding help. The guys that were teaching it were absolute experts and do work a ton of work for Apple. Um, it seemed like it was out of reach for most of us, but I think they said, within 5 years, maybe it'll be kind of do it yourself, and we'll be able to jump into that without all the technical support. But
Yeah, I think that when people talk about AI and they talk about some of the impacts it'll have on productivity, for example, I
mhm.
think a lot of people assume that they can just buy a ChatGPT Plus account and start doing it. And I just don't think it's there yet, right? I mean, I use ChatGPT to rewrite my emails, but I'm not using it to build a
Yeah,
website or a landing page at this point in time.
right. It's the advancements are rapid though, and there's so many tools out there besides ChatGPT. I think that's what's interesting is that it requires someone to spend an enormous amount of time and study it like almost full time to really understand what the capabilities of it can be. Um, well, let me take us a little bit back towards marketing, I guess. And I wanted to ask you what metrics, when you start to work on marketing campaigns, what metrics do you prioritize to assess the success of your marketing campaigns?
As you mentioned, as I mentioned earlier, I'm not necessarily the most classical marketer. I've also held sort of CEO roles and executive roles, and I also sit on some boards. And so I think of metrics a little bit differently than a lot of marketers, which is,
Hmm.
I think it's best when you align with the other stakeholders in the company. So I've written a couple blog articles about why your CFO is your best friend,
Mm,
why your CI, why your sales VP is your best friend. And I think
hmm.
really to do it right, you really have to get metrics that we all agree upon. One of the great parts about working at Amazon Web Services is that we all agreed that the one metric that we would care about, both in marketing and sales, was marketing contributed pipeline.
Okay.
So if the company wants to hit $10 million of pipeline and they think it's going to convert at a 30% conversion to a booked sale,
Hmm.
then what percentage of that $10 million of pipeline can we contribute?
I see.
And the reason why I like talking in those terms versus talking about stuff like cost per click, cost per lead, and stuff like that. I mean, sure, you could talk about that kind of stuff, and it's interesting from the perspective of how do I make sure that my tool is performing better and better.
Hmm.
But in terms of really sort of servicing the needs of the business, I think you got to get to the point where you're all have the same shared goal.
That makes perfect sense. I would totally agree with that. And what's really helpful is when everybody's talking about the same key metric and you get alignment on this is how we're going to judge things. This is how we're going to look at things. And when it's further down the funnel, so that you can include all the points that go along the process and the costs and things like that. That's pretty important, I think, as well.
Yeah, I mean, so like I've been in organizations where they'll be like, "You want leads? I can get you leads.
Yeah.
They may not be any good, but if you just tell me how much you want, you can get them, right? I mean,
Right.
so there's lots of different ways to game the system. If you want open rates, everyone knows how to goose open rates, whatever, right? So
Yeah.
I think that when the rubber hits the road is what happens to that lead once it gets into the pipeline.
Yeah.
And is it
Sales is the end of the day, right? We all have to be judged based on the sales.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
You know that you can't go down with the ship going, well, you said great leads.
yeah, exactly.
It's got to convert, right? And so I do spend time starting with sales and working backwards in terms of what my goals are.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And then obviously understanding each point of at each point in the process what's happening and how do we affect those conversion rates or those whatever the response or whatever it is. How do we influence those things? Um, how can marketers today balance data-driven strategies with creative intuition? I know it sounds like you're very focused on data-driven strategies. I am too. Um, but there's a lot of people out there that rely on creative intuition, and maybe that's just not a good approach anymore.
Well, it's so funny because, as I mentioned to you, it's very clear that I'm data first, right? And when I wrote my first book, which is The New Rules of Lead Generation, it's very data. I think I even have like a sentence in there where I say, don't ignore your creative mind because it doesn't matter.
Ah,
But interestingly enough, in my old age, I've actually shifted from that perspective. I actually do think there's some value in the creative aspect of it and thinking through some of those things. And I
yeah,
myself even picked up a couple techniques on brand that's allowed me to have even better performance on my lead generation campaigns in the future.
yeah. I definitely believe in the power of creativity in marketing because I've hit a few home runs with really creative ideas in my career. And I guess, but it always goes into a structured testing environment.
Yeah.
After we create it, it has to go into a structured testing environment where we're sticking with our control and testing against it. You mentioned A/B testing that, we have to always gather the data and learn the specific effects of things before we sort of roll things out. I think where it gets really risky is when people just jump into ideas that are untested, right?
Yeah. I mean, so interestingly enough, I think there is a fine line, right? I remember I was working for a startup as a CMO, and we spent 8 hours determining whether or not the C in the logo looked like this or it looked like that, right? Is
Oh,
it this
wow.
kind of C or is it that kind of C?
Yeah.
And at that point in time, I thought diminishing returns. So,
Yeah.
definitely pick your battles. But I mean, listen, like I still remember Steve Jobs' approach on marketing, and when he first created the first Apple Macintosh, and people thought the thing was ugly. And he said, "Well, you know what? We designed it so that 25% of the population would think this is the ugliest thing in the world
Mm,
because it sparks conversation.
yeah.
And conversation builds brand.
Hmm.
And so I've always thought of that, put that in mind, and I love a little bit of controversy in my marketing.
Must be how Tesla came up with the Cybertruck.
I think that's exactly the strategy. Same thing with the VW Bug when they redesigned it. They
Yeah.
wanted the design to be stark enough that it would ignite conversation.
Yeah. Well, it plays into what we do here with direct mail marketing because we often get our creative ideas often get passed across a big committee of people on the client side, and it becomes very difficult when we have to try to make everyone happy.
Mhm.
When we're trying to design things, sometimes we're shooting for a small group, a small subset of the population, and if we're successful with that small subset, then it's a success. But if your committee is editing it, trying to make it everyone happy, it just takes the punch away from the creative, if you will.
Mm.
Um, Having led teams across many different organizations, what are some of your strategies you found effective in building and nurturing high performance marketing teams?
Yeah, so listen, I love OB, organizational behavior. I love the idea of being able to create an environment which protects the psychological safety of your team, because I think if you do that, then you get some of the most interesting and innovative work, right?
Mm.
And so one of the things, the tricks that I've used is celebrating failure. Because I
Mm.
think if you could be okay with failure and you can that means that you're okay with risk. And if you're okay
Mm.
with risk, then you're okay encouraging that one crazy idea that just might work.
Yeah.
And in creative, and then in marketing, I think that's really mission critical, right? So when I was at Twitter, one of my employees came up and said, "I'm thinking about doing just a crazy podcast. Well, and I'll be the host or whatever, but we just want to talk about people's businesses and how they launched the campaign. And we're like, oh, I don't know, sure, let's give it a shot. And it turned out to be a really wonderful program
Hmm.
that really was sort of recognized across the industry as being a best practice. When he came to me, he's like, you know what, this is probably going to fail. I'm going to try a couple of these things. It's going to cost us X number of dollars to do it. Can I have the money?
Hmm.
That was one of those crazy ideas where we didn't expect necessarily to succeed.
Hmm.
And that was okay. That was
Yeah.
okay.
Right.
And so I love creating a space for people to be able to provide suggestions in a constructive way, and to really try some things out without fear of it having to be successful for us having to have been successful as a company.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. I mean, when we build teams around direct marketing, we always encourage everyone to contribute ideas, and almost demand that everyone commit, bring ideas.
Yeah.
We'll have focus groups and sit around and talk about concepts and make everyone draw concepts. And sometimes the kernel of a fantastic idea comes from the most unexpected places. It's really interesting. Um, for those that are entering the field of marketing today, what skills or experiences should they focus on to excel in customer acquisition or other marketing roles?
It's so interesting. Um, I teach marketing at a couple universities, and what I've come to learn is there are so many amazing training opportunities that are free of charge on
Mm,
YouTube.
okay.
Training course sites like Udemy and even websites like HubSpot's website that you
Hmm.
could actually come into a job actually being extremely experienced, right? I
Mm,
mean, and what's funny about it is this has always happened in the developer space, right? Which is you can teach yourself how to code. You could become a pretty good coder before you get into your first interview for your entry coding job.
mm,
And you could put in 10, 20, 100 hours a week of work to become an expert before you even walk in. In fact, you almost have to because they're most likely going to give you a coding test, right?
mm,
Uh, Same thing I think with marketing as well. I think that you could come in, I mean, for no money at all, you can come in as a HubSpot certified CRM manager. You can come in as a Google SEM specialist. I mean, there's so many free certifications out there and so much free tooling that you should not feel like you're coming in to have to learn on the job.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know my daughter just graduated from college and she's still taking classes on YouTube and learning things all the time for her
Yeah.
first job. So it's definitely a
What is she
thing.
majoring?
She majored in business and she's going into financial advising, so she's got a lot of tests to take to get her certificates and things.
Yes, that's a big certification.
That's right. It's an exciting time for the young people today. I think there's so much AI out in the world that there's got to be that's changing everything really rapidly for their careers. How do you think AI is going to impact us in the marketing world? I know that's a huge question.
Well, I don't know yet. First and foremost, like I think as a productivity tool, it's already affecting marketers. I think marketers can become extreme better at writing by being able to have the ChatGPT weigh in on their work. I think people find that it's not always perfect, but it at least it sparks new ideas and can also get you sort of 80% of the way there. I've experimented with tools which uses AI to be able to like create blog articles or create social media posts based off of a one prompt a single prompt that you might give them.
Mm-hmm.
None of them ever worked really great for me, but I think all that stuff is improving. So I think there's some opportunity there to really sort of leverage AI in a very interesting way once it gets there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it still needs a lot of human interaction and human um, intervention to sort of create the right end result, but it's coming along for sure.
Yeah, I've even tried to use Midjourney to create, you know how you need like a nice photo to go with your blog article, right? Or the
Yeah.
background on LinkedIn. and they
Yeah.
just never get it right. I'm like, wait, hold on. This thing's got six fingers. I don't want six fingers executive or something along those lines. And so
Yeah.
I'm cautiously optimistic.
Yeah.
Speaking of your daughter, one use case I've been focused on, I've been really excited about is the testing and learning use case. So,
Yeah.
hey, give me a curriculum on search engine marketing.
Yeah.
Build a pop quiz on SEO to see
Yeah.
if I understand what I've just learned.
Yeah.
I think those are really, really fun and interesting use cases. And my brother, for example, is sitting for the orthodontist exam, the boards.
Hmm.
And every single day he'll grab a cup of coffee and then he'll say, give me a 10-question exam that would be on the boards. And they're legitimate, extremely accurate questions.
Yeah, I imagine that AI is going to revolutionize education because I know I'm using it all the time to like, hey, I don't understand this. Explain it to me, and it'll explain it to you at whatever level you want to ask it about. So it's amazing how you can design your own classes using it. It's very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And that has impact to the marketing organization because we become more prepared, right? Like, could you go in
Yeah,
there and go, hey, give me three really interesting use cases
yeah,
on how a food and beverage company
right.
did their social media, and then
Yeah.
and provide some really good comparative points for you.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that I mean AI's got to be a huge impact for people that have relied heavily on like search-based marketing.
Mhm.
Um, because I feel like search-based marketing has gone away or is seems like it might be going away because now I ask a question and I used to get a list of websites to look through. Now I get the answer from AI right in Google. So it's like I don't need to go to anybody's website to figure it out. That's got to be changing things dramatically, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, I believe I had read an article talking about how Google, for the first time ever, is going to be completely revamping their search engine tool to focus on AI,
Hmm.
probably for that exact reason.
Yeah.
You remember back in the day, there used to be something called Quora, which was like the
Yeah.
larger. That was when search engine marketing, like search engines, didn't even respond to a question, right? Like you'd say, what's the most populous state in California? And it couldn't answer it. So
Right.
Quora came out and answered all those questions and then SEO'd the questions and had a pretty thriving business for a while.
Hmm. Yeah. That's amazing. Well, pretty soon, I don't imagine we'll have to type. We'll be able to open a screen and there'll be somebody's face there that we can just talk to. It'll be our assistant, right? Like our online assistant. I can't wait till we get that. I mean, I want Siri to actually have a face and I can talk to her, or like it's got to be coming really soon, I would think. But
Why she stares at you while you're sleeping. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
uh,
That'd be a
well,
bridge
there's the
too far
creepy
for me.
sort of surveillance aspect of all these things, which is a whole nother story. But we as marketers will try not to focus on that, I guess. Um, who are some of the people that were influential and really helped you in your career? You've had such a remarkable career and done so much. Who was someone that shaped your or helped shape your career?
Yeah, so I've been very lucky to have about a bunch of really amazing mentors throughout my career. Um, the first
I
job I
would.
got out of college, I worked for Jack Welch,
Oh
GE,
wow.
and
Okay.
that was amazing. And then when I became a CMO for the first time years ago, I actually became friends with Philip Kotler. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if you know who Philip Kotler is, but do you remember that Fundamentals of Marketing book that was everyone's textbook in marketing? He wrote that.
Yeah.
He was the inventor of the four Ps, for example.
Ah, yes. Okay. That sounds very familiar.
Yeah, and he was like 85 at the time, and he was a professor emeritus at Kellogg, which at
Okay.
that point in time was the premier marketing school.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a chance to spend some one-on-one time with him, and it was really quite remarkable.
That's wonderful. Um, if you could give your younger self one piece of advice at the start of your marketing journey, what would you tell yourself?
Just one?
Oh, well, no, I'm not going to limit you to just one. If you want to make a list, that's fine too.
You know
What
what's
would you
funny
tell yourself?
is I think that I would tell my younger self that if you were really serious about marketing, it might be worthwhile to get into CPG. So you're familiar with the Procter and Gambles of the world, the Kellogg's of the
Mm-hmm.
world. They all have these really amazing training grounds. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that they teach you, just like IBM teaches you how to be a really good salesperson early on. I
Mm-hmm.
think P&G teaches you how to be a really good marketing person early on. And
Gotcha.
I think that exposure would have been really enlightening.
Mm, awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I think that we've covered a lot of ground, and this has been really wonderful, Dave. Thank you so much for joining me today, and have a great rest of your weekend.
All right, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
All right.
That's a wrap for this episode of Response Drivers. Thanks for tuning in. If you found today's insights valuable, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you're enjoying the show, we'd love it if you left a review. Got a question or a topic you'd like us to cover? Just drop us a message at responsedrivers@rpmdm.com. Until next time, keep driving response and making your marketing work smarter.